Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Age of AI, our series covering the rapid evolution of the AI landscape, exploring what's now, what's next, how that impacts the world of business, the workplace, individuals, and the world. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer&Co. And today's conversation is part two of a series centered on exploring the democratization of AI. My guest is KJ Kusch, who's the Global Field CTO of WalkMe. Welcome back, KJ.
Thanks, Shelley. Good to see you again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, in the first part of our series, we talked about the problems of access and usability and impact gaps in many current AI deployments and how democratizing AI can actually help solve for that. We explored what's happening in the market on the AI democratization front. We talked about who's getting it right, and we explored where we're seeing some gaps. We also discussed that while the democratization of AI clearly has benefits, the reality of it is that there are many who just simply aren't there yet. And so KJ and I shared some thoughts on the risks of ignoring democratization in favor of relying on centralized AI governance alone. Bottom line, you'll definitely want to go back and watch that first episode in the series. Today, we're going to pick up that conversation and we're going to focus on business use cases for AI democratization. You ready, KJ?
I am ready.
All right, let's dive in. So let's talk about enabling scale and productivity and the role that democratizing AI plays there. So what's the business case for AI democratization?
Well, I think, Shelley, you and I have talked about this in the past, where ROI really comes from scale, right? Doing it safely and simply.
Right.
You know, when I work with our customers, what I really see is faster onboarding, reduced support costs, and probably more consistent AI adoption. So
Yeah.
I think, the question everybody says is, how do you measure it, right? And I could tell you, we do a really good job of measuring avoided errors, right? Increased usage of those AI tools, and of course, time savings. It's not, you could say train in PowerPoint and then go use it. The truth of it is, it takes more time to get to use it than people really notice. So for me, right, it pays off doing it at scale, and that way it really pays off in time, trust, and training savings. Those are the three key.
Yeah, I agree. I had an interesting experience, KJ, and I was at an event in San Francisco. It was put on by a startup in the AI space, and actually their VC firm. And the theme of the event was CFOs and AI, and exploring, CFOs' thoughts on AI and all of that sort of thing. And there were 3 CFOs, and some didn't actually have the CFO title, but they were very immersed in decisioning and driving enterprise AI initiatives and that sort of thing. And one of the panelists in this discussion was the CFO of a giant company. And he said during the course of the conversation about measuring the impact of AI that, it's just impossible. It's just impossible to measure AI and, any impact of AI throughout an organization. And anybody who tells you it is crazy. And, and I honestly, it was all I could do to keep my mouth closed, because I very much disagree. And, and I've seen measurement, and again, I've seen the job that WalkMe does in terms of you are able to see, whether it's on a dashboard or a report, exactly what's happening in terms of adoption, exactly what's happening in terms of integration, exactly what's happening in like where people are getting hung up in the process and bailing because they're frustrated. And so it really is absolutely possible to measure the impact of what you're doing with AI. And I think that's really important for people to understand. Like, don't believe it when people who should know better say that it's impossible, because it is possible.
Well, I totally agree. Like, I've had a couple of meetings in the last week, and I think that same bias of I can't measure it is because they don't see it. They don't have a tool that says, here's what it's like to do a business process with WalkMe or without, right? And of course we can, because we're looking at usage and we're looking at cycle time. And we watch people on a screen, basically. I mean, we're not physically watching, but we're
Right.
looking at the time. We're recording how many errors did they make, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take? And when you do that A/B type testing, right? An example is building an account plan for sales. We'll go back to your husband from episode 1, right? And what it's like to do it with AI correctly, safely, right? With
Yeah.
all the right policy pop-ups, right? And what it's like to do without it. And it's night and day. I mean, you're literally talking about I saved hours and hours and hours of
Right.
work, and it
Right.
compiles it and it gets it ready. And when you literally see that bar graph that goes without versus with, and you can see the incremental difference, is huge,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to measure the adoption rate. Are people even using it, right? Because what if they're just doing, they're bypassing the AI? Well, why don't we look for that too? You
Right.
invested in the tool. It's a 3-year contract. Let's get some adoption use out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I thought you'd enjoy that story, and I felt reasonably confident that you would, as I did, think that that was just
Yeah.
completely off base.
No surprise. We're thinking just alike again.
So, would you explain to me? And I've actually seen this in action, but I would love if you would explain to me how organizations use WalkMe to accelerate, for
Mm,
instance, the AI onboarding process, especially for employees who aren't technical. And for many of them, this is a little scary. Right. And so talk with me about how WalkMe helps accelerate AI onboarding.
yeah, sure. So I think, originally when AI came out, people said, let's send them to training, right? Or let's just use techies who will figure it out.
Yeah.
And then WalkMe comes along. And so instead of sending people to that training, right, to a training portal, we literally do the training in the flow of work. So imagine, right, the way that we're training people now with AI is it's interactive, which is exactly what people need. And it's course correcting based on the behaviors doing. So some people, for example, when they go to use AI, one is, how do I get there? Okay, let's take you there. Now that I'm there, we can do walkthroughs that literally show you how to do prompting, how to use the interface of different types of tools. And
Yeah.
we're doing that with little nudges. We have smart tips, right? We're actually looking at what they put into the prompt and saying, hey, I'm going to tell you this is against your policy. This data shouldn't be here. And so what's happening is you're continually learning as you do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's always on. So, for example, we just let somebody type in HR with AI, right? But there's a little dot and it's very like non-invasive. And it says, you know what? This isn't a good performance review. You didn't say enough, or it's right. The words are not wrong, or you shouldn't, put this derogatory comment in there. And what's interesting, if you click the red dot, it actually shows you exactly where using AI, you probably should change what you're saying, especially as a
Yeah.
manager, right?
Yeah.
So you go and change it. And what's really nice is the dot turns green, right? So
Right.
sometimes that training can be very, follow the bouncing ball. Let's tell you how to do it. And then after a while, just so we don't create fatigue or people stop learning, is we do the subtle type, which is that always on. And what you'll see is, right, it goes from a red light to a green light. You're good to go. So I
Yeah.
think there's multiple ways.
Yeah, I like that. And, I've mentioned this before, but I always think about, my visual when I think about WalkMe and WalkMe's capabilities is that I feel like it's just my little assistant sitting sort of invisibly on my shoulder, watching what I'm doing and just gently nudging me along and sort of teaching me as I go. But, when you think about this, the example that you gave from a performance evaluation standpoint. Okay, think about that extrapolated to business risk.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want people writing performance reviews where they're saying inappropriate things. And so, not all of us are good writers. Not all of us are great at putting our thoughts together and that sort of thing. But there is a risk to the business in terms of having information that shouldn't be, having something said in a performance review that maybe should be said in a different way and that sort of thing. So there are some risk factors, I think, that WalkMe can help mitigate there, and compliance that can be a significant enabler for the business.
I agree. What's funny is if you ask an end user about AI, right? I go to this Korea Girls cocktail and we all talk about it, right? We're all women, we're all professionals, and we talk about how do we get it going in our org, right? I happen to work for a vendor They're the company side of it. And I think the most fascinating thing I heard in my women's group was AI needs to feel natural, because
Yeah.
if it's not natural, it's intimidating and people will shut it down, right?
Right.
And so they're all very excited about, using it. It's very, it's kind of like the, hey, I can use Siri on my phone and she tells me what to do now, right? That's
Right.
kind of what they really want, is something super simple and
Yeah.
non-intimidating.
And you kind of feel like Siri is your friend, right? And
Same.
and that makes it easy. But and thinking about, we have all sat through training sessions. I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, I'd rather gouge my eyes out with rusty forks. And you just, even knowing that you've got this on your schedule, you approach it with dread. Whereas when you have something that, like I said, is my little invisible assistant sitting on my shoulder, nudging me gently along, suggesting things, and I learn as I go. And so I think that makes the experience not an arduous one at all. And like you said, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for intuitiveness. They're looking for ease. They're looking for not feeling like, I have to be super techie to be able to navigate this, or get frustrated halfway through and bail. And so I think that's a big part of the value prop of WalkMe, at least what I've always viewed anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the risk, people, if people don't use it, you're at risk, right?
Yeah.
You're non-competitive.
Yeah.
For our company, right, we definitely want to make sure that, I mean, if you've never looked at how many policies a company has, you'd be shocked, right?
Yeah.
And who wants to know what policy applies to what process? Nobody. So if something like WalkMe applies it for you naturally and points out,
Yeah.
this doesn't have PII data, you can't use these words in HR, right? All of those different things based on how you spend your day. Now it's your friend. It's your friend in every role and every task you do.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
really where it de-risks for the company and for the user.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk fragmentation and fatigue. So, we're in a situation where our collective reality is that AI tools are entering the market at an astonishingly rapid pace. And so we've got fragmentation, we've got tool fatigue that are real challenges for organizations of all sizes. I'm sure you have conversations with your customers about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how you advise companies to help navigate those challenges.
Yeah, great question. So, I'm never going to be able to convince somebody, and I actually wouldn't because I don't believe in it. Like, there's the one super AI tool that does everything everywhere, right? But what I will tell you is, I believe you can really effectively use multiple, and that's where WalkMe really comes in.
Right.
We are really that cross-platform orchestrator.
Right.
So if you think about, how do I get like away from AI sprawl? So we know there's Copilot here, there's Gen AI there, there's Watson somewhere else, right? WalkMe acts as that orchestrator that lays over all of those tools. And I think what makes that nice for users, because we want adoption of all of them, is it guides them through that, guides them across systems, giving them that consistent use. And you feel safe that you're going to use AI in the right way, regardless of what that screen looks like, right? So it centralizes it. Not only that, it centralizes, the adoption usage and the compliance and the policy all one way, instead of having to do it multiple times. Think about what I said. If a company has 44 AI tools, you'd be repeating, right, usability 44 times. How about we
Right.
just centralize it? That's what
Right.
users really need. So for WalkMe, I think what really matters most is creating that, what would I call it? A coherent user experience,
Yeah.
right? Something that really says it doesn't matter what AI tool you use. AI tools are great. A lot of them are purpose built, they're very functionally built. We just want to make sure people use them and have a great experience.
Yeah.
And so I think that really helps with the fatigue, because now I'm not learning 9 different ways. I'm used to that soft nudging. I get used to, like, I'll go back to that example, the red light,
Yeah.
green light, right?
Yeah.
It's a very passive, nice way. And those simple behaviors that coach, right?
Yeah.
Just have one coach. It's why a football team has one coach. You only need one head coach. You can, you know, the tools underneath can be the offensive coach, a defensive coach, but the one head coach that's really helping that user is WalkMe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk now a little bit, KJ, about ethics and inclusion and the human side of all of this, because I think those are all incredibly important parts of any conversation about AI. So, democratizing AI can also mean ensuring ethical and equitable use. Talk with me a little bit about the role that WalkMe plays on this front.
Sure. So I would say this is really where WalkMe plays an operational role, right? This is very tactical part of WalkMe, and I think a lot of people get that. So let's just use a couple examples. So first, right, we warn users they're about to misuse something, and everybody wants a warning, right? We don't want to do it wrong and then get yelled at. We want it to be proactive, so we do that. I think the second thing is just logging risky behavior. So, what a lot of people don't know about WalkMe is we're watching usage, right? We're looking at how people fill out forms, we're looking at errors. Well, that means we're also capturing that risky behavior in AI. And we want to know what those patterns are. And that's collectively across an organization or departmentally, because I turned on a certain feature, right? An AI feature. I think we also, let's say, provide just in time nudges because not everybody needs to have those instructions as you go, right? If I know how to use AI and I've used it a lot, all of a sudden I forget. And so a nudge is really great to say, hey, don't forget, right?
Right.
I'll give you an example. I have a team that does a lot of value calculations, and there's specific statements to make sure the calculation is right, right? A nudge says, hey, you forgot to do an inclusion of these statements. So the calculation comes out a certain way. We call that a nudge, right?
Right.
It's things like, hey, if you're going to reference something from AI, source it. So a nudge says, hey, I don't see that you asked to source it. Or it says, do you want me to source it? Does that make a sense? So I
Yeah.
think nudging is really good to make sure that, you need to source. That's another ethical risk. And I think the biggest thing overall, because let's just talk about people, right? How we treat people, diversity, inclusion, belonging, is I think everybody needs what I would call a fair chance, right? And accountability to using AI, making decisions and being able to use it. And I think commonizing it for every user kind of helps every company deal with the human side, right?
Yeah.
Let's go with the person who never uses it, right? The my parents who can barely get to use a cell phone. All of a sudden, right, they're using Copilot on their phone. I'm like, what? Like, how crazy is that? And it really comes down to humanizing it.
Right.
So that's what I really like about WalkMe and how we deal with that ethical side.
Yeah, I think that's important. And this question is kind of, it's a related question. So let's talk about what's ahead.
Okay.
Obviously, the use of AI comes with regulatory challenges that have to be navigated. It
Yeah.
also comes with some reputational risk. How do you see WalkMe helping organizations navigate and address these things?
Well, so I'm going to go back to, and I probably said it before, but I'll just say it different, right? I think it's all about prevention over reaction. Every CISO I talk to, right, wants to prevent something, not react to it. They're just night and day. So if they build in those safeguards, the ones that we were talking about earlier today, like, nudges, or we need to connect in real time those standard operating procedures or policies or rules, governance models, right? CISOs want to see that the logging and the audit trails, they want it
Right.
all mitigated. They don't want an escalation, they want a mitigation. So I'll go
Right.
back, right? So it's just two words. It's really about proactive protection. That's what companies really want. So we
Right.
want to prevent those incidents. So incidents are a nightmare, right? I never wanted it. I don't want to know after the fact that I had PII, leakage, right?
Right.
I don't want to know after the fact that somebody misused it, right? I don't even want unauthorized users of a tool, right? That whole, I can pick you up and take you somewhere else. I used the wrong one, right? All of these are intervening mid-task, right? Let me just intervene so it doesn't even happen. And that's
Yeah.
really what we're looking for is keeping people secure and compliant.
Right. And that makes CISOs very happy.
It does. Yeah. Finally, I
Uh,
can be friends with the CISO. That's not an easy job for me, right? I could talk
It
to
is
the CIO and be innovative. CISO is a whole nother world. And the
absolutely.
way we address AI, this is a very important conversation for them.
I agree. I agree. Well, another topic that's been on my mind a great deal is what I see is the very real fear about AI replacing jobs.
Yeah.
I think that I have grown weary of people in our industry using the phrase, AI isn't going to take your job. Someone
Oh,
knows how to use AI will. Because the reality of it is, in
yeah.
my opinion, AI is absolutely going to take jobs. I mean, the reality of it is,
Yeah.
um, if it can be automated, it will be automated. That said, I think there are great opportunities. And so, and the democratization of AI, I believe, will play a role in shifting that narrative. What are your thoughts on that front?
I agree. I think back, you and I, even years ago, we talk about what the future of work is, right? Well, the
Right,
future of work is here. That's what AI is doing.
right,
But I think this is where people get a misconception because yes, AI can take jobs away, right? I think RPA did that, right? Think about all the back
absolutely.
office automation we did. When we talk about AI today, I think there is AI assisted work. Think about
Yes,
that, right? So I can't really take people out, but what I would really love to do in my role is give people superpowers, right? I'm here to give you superpowers, not replace you with WalkMe. What we're particularly interested in is, making sure employees don't fear AI, right? That they
right,
use it confidently. And that kind of shifts it from a threat, right? To where transformation begins. Not just
right.
transformation of people, but how companies work, right? How do they operate and decide where to interject AI? And so that means, like, think about a project, right? If I have to fund a project or if I'm talking to a customer about how to fund a project for AI, I'm like, okay, well, what the story isn't replaced with AI. Not yet. I do believe one day more and more work will be there. I don't know how long it's going to take, but there's a journey from doing everything on forms, right? S4 HANA has how many screens? Infinite number. It'll be a long time, or even Oracle ERP, right? It's
Yeah,
going to be a long time before all of that is replaced. So let's talk about how to augment the journey. And let's
yeah,
plan for year one, year two, and year three. And let's take baby steps, right, with the people and figure out how to become operators of AI, not victims of it.
right.
And that's that conversation. And so in that practice, we basically build these bite-sized little journeys for AI that one day, right, may eventually change the job, but right now we're all on this journey together.
Yeah,
Anything that's front end and user interfacing, I believe if it could have been replaced, it would have been replaced long ago with back office automation. So now we're
right,
really talking about front office. And
right.
so it's all about that bite size augmentation, one bite at a time.
Well, and I think that, a lot of the data that I've seen has been that the heaviest users today of specifically Gen AI in the
Yeah.
workplace tend to be higher level C-suite managers, executives, that sort of thing. And take when we don't take democratization seriously, and when we don't take this as when we don't understand that this is an important corporate wide initiative, what you do is you kind of have the haves and the have
Yeah.
nots. And the
Yeah.
have nots are over here. They want to learn, they want to
Mhm.
upskill, they want to not fear this transformation that's happening, that they can see happening. They want to be a part of it, they want to contribute to it. So I think that it's really important from a cultural standpoint, from a corporate culture standpoint, to understand the super important role that democratization plays there.
Yeah. Every day. I mean,
Yeah,
it's nobody learns the same. Isn't that interesting, right?
yeah,
We know
yeah,
that. We know when our kids went to school, they're just, not your
yeah.
children didn't go through it the same. You had the difficult one, you had the easy
Right,
one, you had some in the middle, right?
right.
And I think AI is going to be the same way. And we
Yeah,
have to figure out how to treat them all based on the role they do and
yeah,
what's the outcome you're trying to achieve with AI. So I think those are all key in making sure we get there, right, ethically and
yeah,
for everyone.
yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to talk a little bit now about use cases and patterns, KJ. Can
Yeah.
you share an example for me of a client who used WalkMe to turn AI risk into value and what might have made that successful?
Yeah, sure. So let me think. So I have a customer, right, who rolled out AI summarization across the department, right? So they were trying to get that usage. Well, what they did is they actually embedded those prompts with usage rules, right? Can I use it or can I not? And guidance in the tool interface. So you don't even know WalkMe's there when they rolled out AI. That's the way to think about it. And so those three simple things, they had one goal, right? Is to not have incidents. So
Right.
a couple of things. One is they had 0 incidents, which is great. Imagine they
Yeah.
eliminated risk on the first try. I think
Yeah.
that's what guardrails do a really good job of. But they also had 2 times the amount of adoption um, with WalkMe in 6 weeks, right? So the key is, right, they didn't treat it like a tool. WalkMe was not a tool, right? They treated it like an orchestrator to
Yeah.
help people build trust and put a lot of support around their rollout. So,
Yeah.
so imagine, you think you're going to take 3 months and it took 6 weeks. That's a
Yeah.
lot of savings for a company, right?
Yeah.
And every incident is, more money than we could ever imagine, right? Depends on the
Right.
industry. I can't even put a dollar amount on it, right? But for this one, it particularly affected, right, whether the close rate they were doing on sales was going to hit or not. And right, 0 incidents. Every
Yeah.
deal was structured correctly.
That is music to the ears of people who are looking at the bottom line, right? And
That's
and
right.
the other part of it is, though, this is empowerment. This is I think that we're in an age, this age of AI is and will be so transformative to the way that we work and the way that we work and live. And I think speed to value is top of mind for everyone. So I think that, an example like that, where a job that might take normally 3 months can be done in 6 weeks, and you could actually attach a dollar value to that. That's part of the proof of concept, I mean, sign me up,
Well,
right?
and imagine for the user, you're paid on the close.
Yeah,
So now all of a sudden I can close faster, which means I can close more. And it just means I get to take home more money. So the
right.
what's in it for me for that end user customer is huge. I mean, they
Yeah,
felt the superpower. They felt, right, the time was quicker. And I think the most important part in their satisfaction survey, they felt safe,
yeah,
right? The everyday user felt safe using AI.
yeah. Well, I think that's important. So, talk with me a little bit. I know you've got clients all over the world and in all kinds of industries.
Yeah.
And that puts you and your team in a perfect position to see emerging patterns across industries. So,
Yeah.
what are you seeing from an emerging pattern standpoint in terms of where AI is being adopted and where it's still struggling to take hold?
Yeah, and keep in mind, right, WalkMe is focused on humans, right? Those
Right.
those workflows where we insert AI in the flow of work. And I would say there's 3 areas that are top for us. So the very first one is service centers. We see right all of those customer call reps who have multiple tools, right? That's great. Secondly is sales. I think you and I have used those examples,
Yeah.
including your husband, right? And then the last one is really in what I would call what's the right word? Like a content workflow. So
Yeah.
there are like that third category. I wouldn't even say is industry specific. I would say that third category is people want to try a use case, right? They're still in the pilot mode. And I'm amazed how many customers that we work with are like, I just want to do it once before I buy into it from the enterprise or from the department. I
Let me
just want to
try.
do it once. I want to try once. And so I'll just call that they're going to try an outcome or a workflow. So, all in service centers, sales, right? Where I see a lot of struggle, and I think that has to do with the risk, because no matter how much you and I have talked to risk about risk and how we can help, I still think we see a lot
Scary.
of struggle. Yeah, I still see a lot of struggle in the financial services.
Right.
I do see it with HR, because even though it could be used, I think that the whole being sued and this or that, like you shouldn't generate a performance review. You should write it, right? It's less
Right.
risky, believe it or not. And then healthcare is another big one,
Yeah.
right? It's that, you always sit in front of a CIO and they're like, people could die. I can't trust AI, right? It's kind of interesting. So,
Or AI could actually help save their lives. I
yeah,
mean,
I, I recently saw a doctor. And I had to sign a disclaimer. They put out a disclaimer now, and it says we do not use AI in this treatment. I was like, wow. I'm like, they're like literally publishing, myself personally. They published that they don't use it. That's how at risk
Proudly,
they are. Yeah. So
proudly.
yeah,
Well, and conversely, I've seen recently, I'm sure it was on TikTok or Instagram Reels or something like that. There's important sources for information. But I saw a radiologist showing a scan that had been read by AI, and basically what he was saying was like, they don't need me
yeah. Isn't
because
that
this is
amazing?
faster and
Yeah,
better, and that I'm really, really good at what I do, but this
yeah.
is better,
Patterns.
and so like again, I will never understand,
Yeah,
we talked about this in our first episode, when your approach is shutting it down.
yeah.
I don't trust Facebook, so we're not going to let you have access in the early days of social. And I'm scared of AI, so we're just not going to use it. And it doesn't make any sense. And so I think that's interesting to hear people that disclaimer. That's
It is.
crazy.
It goes down to why do people, so how do people pick the one use case or the one pilot, right?
Yeah,
Is I think naturally, without even trying AI, they believe there's a pattern to that particular use case they picked, right? And just like when you were talking about x-rays, what's really fascinating about AI, it's very good at patterns, right? That's
right,
what it does. It processes lots of data.
right.
And so, in HR, there's not a lot of patterns. Like everybody's a unicorn. Every
Yeah,
employee is almost like a unicorn, right? And so you treat them like that. So they're there's not as much use for AI versus the manager who's doing it, right? Employees, manager, right? Managers have to write.
right.
Um, and I think it really comes down to AI is so good at patterns. Think about those use cases where patterns matter,
Yeah,
right? But before you use that pattern for anything, before you put action to it, right? Make a decision. This is where WalkMe with AI is really good. What do you want to do next? I found something. What's the action? Because the guardrails, a lot of the time, come in the action you take from it. And
yeah,
so, whatever AI, so let's say, for example, I'm sitting on another AI tool or watching or whatever, right?
yeah.
The action is where most often policy is applied. And of course, we can help there.
Right. Absolutely. KJ, as we wrap this series, I'm going to ask one final question. And I know it's a question that you deal with on a regular basis. If you had to give one piece of advice to a CIO or a CISO or any leader within an organization who's trying to operationalize AI responsibly, what would that advice be?
I would say treat AI like a culture change, not a tech rollout. What it really means is build trust, guide the usage, and govern smartly. So, if I have to talk about what that really means, it means empower your people, enforce your policies, but embed support. So, luckily for me, WalkMe gives the infrastructure to do all three of those.
Right.
And you're right, it's a question all the time. So it
Yeah.
makes doing my job fabulous. It's basically the trifecta for
I
AI.
love it. I love it. Well, that's it for this final episode of this two-part Age of AI series, focusing on the democratization of AI, exploring what's ahead and how organizations can navigate this exciting but challenging time. KJ Kusch, Global Field CTO for WalkMe, thanks so much for joining me for this series. To our viewers and listeners, I'm your host, Shelley Kramer. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Age of AI, and we'll see you here next time. Thanks again, KJ.
Thanks, Shelley. Great to see you again.